The launch of MSI Godlike motherboards comes but once a year, and I found a second link to Christmas because this MSI MEG X870E Godlike X, last year was the regular Godlike, this year it's the Godlike X, weighs, would you believe, 8 kilos boxed. And it turns out that's the same weight as a baby reindeer. Isn't that just a festive link? I'm going to perform an unboxing and then we'll get on with a review. But would you first please check that the subscribe button actually says subscribed? If it doesn't say subscribed, press that button. It may come as a surprise to learn that MSI unveiled the very first Godlike motherboard, the X99A, as the name suggests. That's an X99 chipset from Intel. That board was unveiled in 2015, and that makes this motherboard an anniversary edition, 10 years of Godlike, albeit it'd be about 10 years and 4 or 5 months, because the X99A was unveiled at Computex, and I have a really poor quality photo to prove this point because I was there for the unveiling. And when the X99A Godlike arrived, we were gobsmacked to learn that it had RGB lighting on board. Also, it was priced somewhere close to £500. This motherboard, this X870E Godlike X, is priced at £1,250 including VAT. Okay, let's perform an unboxing. And this is a genuine unboxing, although the plastic wrap is very slightly torn there. I have not yet opened the motherboard. The review kit for this board tells us that it comes with a great many accessories and bits and pieces. So let's see what's inside. Cardboard sleeve just touches the ceiling. Huge. Okay, what have we got? Oh, that's neat. Now that's neat. Godlike X. With the Godlike X symbol. Bet they have fun packing this at the factory. Blimey. And there inside is the board. Right, let's take out the various bits and pieces. That's a clever control unit that takes a whole bunch of connectors off the board, which I find quite extraordinary because the board is going to be huge. Fan connectors and such like. The reason I did this as a live unboxing is because I was slightly expecting this. It's an M.2 heatsink with a Kit Guru logo. But I wasn't certain. I wanted to see it live on camera. We have an M.2 expander. Okay, I know what that is. That's a plushie. Over this side, an accessory box, Wi-Fi antennae, not honestly sure what that is at the moment. Absolutely monumental motherboard. There's no doubt it is an unboxing experience. For £1,250 including VAT, it blooming should be. But fair play MSI, so far you're delivering. Get to those in a bit. I want to see what... It's got a USB-C. Gold finger so you can put your... a display unit, right you have. Even though I'm fairly sure the idea is I take my power bank and I connect it to the USB-C port and I mount the M.2 heatsink on the Goldfinger contact. I'm sure it's then meant to light up, but neither of these are doing that. So I'm going to park this for the time being. I'll make a call, and in the meanwhile let's get on with the unboxing. But first I'm going to swap out this heatsink for the Godlike Kit Guru heatsink. So we have this easy control hub which has all manner of ports and connectors around the outside, and the idea is that there's a control cable, bridge cable, which goes to one of these great many connection points here, so you can avoid having cables trailing across your board. Ironic really, considering you've got a huge amount of board with a huge amount of connections, and then MSI is working very hard to avoid connecting to the board and instead removing those connections off board. Various bits of paperwork. We have an expander hub which allows you to install 2 more M.2 SSDs and then install that in the PCI Express slot. When we pull off the heatsinks, we will see that there are 5 M.2 slots in this board. So 5 plus a further 2. I suppose MSI is attempting to move away from SATA and towards M.2, and I approve of that. And then we have this box, which is sealed. I think we can agree it's exactly as tasteful as we'd expect. And then we have the accessory box. Interestingly, and I did not expect this, which is why I'm doing the unboxing live, so you get my genuine reaction. Even though I've looked at the reviewer's guide PDF very briefly just to understand, you get a lot of stuff with this motherboard. Motherboard itself looks like a solid piece of work, as you'd expect. The expander card for an extra 2 M.2s. How many M.2s do you need? Realistically, 7 M.2s is more than... I've got 4 M.2s and 2 SATA drives in my own PC, and that's more than 20 terabytes of storage. I don't quite know who would require this in addition to this. It's worth pointing out that clearly this is intended for us. It's personalized for us as a review site. We are told there'll be 1,000 of these motherboards and they'll have an individual number. However, the personalized boards for reviewers is additional to that 1,000. When we get our test PC running, we can expect this part, the dynamic dashboard 3, to light up. But it doesn't just light up in a kind of pretty light pattern way. It also shows us all manner of functions. But before we build a test PC and get the system running, there's something else we can look at. The entire unit pulls away. It's magnetically retained and it has a large connector which plugs in there. You can see the CMOS battery beneath. You can also see we have various laid down connectors on the edge of the board. But this display bears some inspection before we get to the stage of actually building the PC. Specifically these connectors here. Because the point is we can take some of the accessories we've previously seen. So the bridge connects there. And we can also take a temperature sensor. Connect that there, and another temp sensor, and connect that there. We can't, however, connect the tuning controller, which is an external gadget so you can stand away from your system and change settings, and I think that's mainly to do with people using LN2 who don't fancy standing too close to the action. The thing is, the tuning controller is not supplied with the Godlike X. It is, however, supplied with the Z890 Unify X, a motherboard I had some months ago and which I lent to James so he could put together a test system. And right now, that tuning controller is winging its way to me from James. So provided that arrives, we can plug it into this video and you won't even see the join in the editing. It'll be like magic. Let's get back to the edge of this easy bridge, as this part is known. We can connect a front panel header extension, which goes like that, and we can also connect USB 2. Also, something that was not obvious to me when I first got this motherboard out of the box, we have a pair of SATA connectors laid down on the side of the board. There's loads of other connections. We're going to go over those in detail, particularly as the rear I/O panel is absolutely monumental. But 2 SATA there, 2 more here, along with some flick switches. And in case you don't need them, you can keep them out of sight. I think the next step is to remove the M.2 shields and also the VRM heatsinks and see what it looks like beneath the surface. The first stages are easy. We've shown that already. Off with the M.2 heatsinks. Simple release. And finally, and there we see the 4 memory slots, CPU socket obviously, 5 M.2s, another piece of protective material that I haven't yet removed, PCI Express expansion slots, and under here of course we have the VRMs, and you won't be surprised to see the VRM heat sinks are absolutely enormous and look incredibly effective. For the expansion slots we have a PCI Express 5x16 for your graphics card and a PCI Express 5x8 which you'll likely use for the M.2 expander card. At the bottom of the board we have a PCI Express 4x4 which runs at ×2 which could be useful for an add-in card. For storage on the motherboard we have 2 M.2 Gen 5s x4 and 2 M.2 Gen 4x4 and the 5th M.2 is a Gen 4x2. We also have 4 SATA connectors. We'll look at the ports and connectors on the rear I/O shortly. For now let's remove the back plate and then we can get to the VRMs. Goodness gracious me, it's an absolute monster of a motherboard. Let's check out the details of the VRMs and also those ports and connectors. The VRMs use a Renesas controller with doublers and are in a 24+2+1 configuration. We have 24 Renesas 110 amp smart power stages for the V-core and 2 more of those VRMs for the SoC. The final stage is by Alpha and Omega and powers the miscellaneous features. We have a stack of ports and connectors on the rear I/O panel and also around the board. On the rear I/O there are 2 USB 4s which are 40 gigabit per second Type Cs and 5 USB 3.2 Type Cs rated at 10 gigabits per second. We also have a front panel connection for a USB 3.2 Type C rated at 20 gigabits per second and another USB-C front panel rated at 10 gigabits per second. For Type A USBs there are 8 USB 3.2s rated at 10 gigabits per second on the rear I/O, and there are front panel connections for 4 USB Type A's rated at 5 gigabits per second, as well as connections for 4 USB 2.0s. For networking we have Marvel 10 gigabit per second and Realtek 5 gigabit per second, and the wireless is Wi-Fi 7 with Bluetooth 5.4. Before we run the Godlike X and move on to performance and testing, I have some good news. The tuning controller from the Unify X Z890 motherboard has arrived from James. I can plug it in for you. There we go. Look at all that spaghetti. And that is what the tuning controller looks like. Power button, reset, plus and minus, fail-save, overclock retry and clear CMOS. In essence what we're doing here is duplicating some of the functions of the micro buttons on the rear I/O panel and also the micro buttons on that panel there. I can see why some overclockers might find this accessory to be very useful. At the moment I have no understanding why MSI includes the connector on this motherboard but does not include this accessory in the package. In the event MSI responds to my query before this review is finished, I shall be sure to add it in.
Sniper Power PC are bringing Christmas magic to gamers everywhere. We've got giveaways all the way up until Christmas, Santa-approved deals on our best builds, and even more surprises to come this festive season. So check out our website, keep an eye on our socials for more information, and win yourself some freebies.
To benchmark the Godlike X, I am treating it to the very best hardware. The processor, AMD Ryzen 9 9950X 3D. The memory is some G-Skill Trident Z5 Royal Neo, rated at DDR5 8000. I looked at the price the other day, nearly fell over. Memory, very expensive these days, but not as expensive as graphics cards. I'm using this MSI RTX 4090 Ventus 3X. I'm using a 4090 for my benchmarking because I've got a ton of data with the 4090. The 5080 on the shelf is a comparable graphics card in terms of performance, but this is tried and true. And then we have our CPU cooler, MSI MPG Core Liquid K360, 360mm AIO. So I'm going to install the hardware, get it up and running, and show you what the BIOS looks like. And then we can enjoy the spectacle of the RGB lighting. The BIOS setup screen is quite conventional and carries Godlike X branding. We've enabled Expo so the memory runs at full speed, and we have Game Boost enabled, which kicks PBO or Performance Boost Overdrive into life. Other features in the BIOS are exactly as we'd expect, but despite appearances we haven't controlled the fans with the BIOS profile using the cooling wizard within the MSI Center software. Mystic Light controls the ARGB lighting on the motherboard and also on the memory. The Core Liquid AIO cooler has its own module within MSI Center, and we have yet another module for the Dynamic Dashboard 3. And let's take a look at some performance figures. In Geekbench 6 Multicore, the Godlike X is at the top of the chart. It outscores the Ryzen 9 9950X 3D on the MEG X870E carbon Wi-Fi thanks to its BIOS settings. It's drawing 242 watts for the CPU at 5.2 GHz. The carbon Wi-Fi was drawing 200 watts and running at 4.9 GHz. But with the extra juice, the processor runs faster, the score is better. In Geekbench 6 single core, the Godlike X again tops the chart. This time the processor's only drawing 2 watts more than the carbon Wi-Fi, which surely can't make much difference. Having said that, the winning margin is very slight. Cinebench R23 Multicore, it's the same deal, the Godlike X at the top of the chart. Memory bandwidth, this is a bit of a mixed bag. So we've got the Intel Core Ultra 9285K running DDR5 8200CU DIMMs at the top of the chart. In second place it's the Core i9 14900K with DDR5 6800. Raptor Lake was always amazingly good with memory control. Then we have the Godlike X. As a reminder, I'm running DDR5 8000 on this motherboard, which explains why it beats the other two Zen 5 processors running DDR5 6000. AMD's always been a bit weak when it comes to memory, but it has to be said it is improving over time. And we have some gaming scores. Far Cry 6 at 1080p, top of the chart by a small margin. It's the Godlike X and the Ryzen 9 9950X 3D, narrowly beating the Ryzen 7 9800X 3D. That Game Boost feature certainly helps. And just as a reminder, those various power figures refer to the entire system power draw. Far Cry 6 at 1440p. The Ryzen 7 9800X 3D wins by a small margin. In second place it's the Ryzen 9 9950X 3D on the Godlike X, followed by the Ryzen 9 9950X 3D on the carbon Wi-Fi. Assassin's Creed Mirage at 1080p, it's very close at the top of the chart, but the winner is the Ryzen 9 9950X 3D on the carbon Wi-Fi. A very small margin behind it's the Godlike X, and between those two figures we have the Ryzen 7 9800X 3D. And finally we have Assassin's Creed Mirage at 1440p. Top of the chart it's the Ryzen 7 9800X 3D. In second place it's the Ryzen 9 9950X 3D on the carbon Wi-Fi, and a tiny margin behind it's the Godlike X. And we reach my conclusions about this mighty MEG X870E Godlike X motherboard. Pros, the good points. Battleship engineering with a 10-layer PCB and a chunky VRM. Secondly, you get a colossal amount of input outputs with almost endless USB-Cs. Third, the Dynamic Dashboard 3, to remind you, that part there, is epic. Fourth, you get loads of DIY features. I haven't mentioned some of them. Installing M.2s is simple. We've also got a quick release for the graphics card. We've also got micro buttons on board. And fifth, you get accessories galore. Some of them are useful. On which subject? I have heard back from MSI about why the tuning controller is not included in the package with the Godlike X. So what they've said in their email to me in essence is Godlike X owners aren't likely to use the tuning controller. They're not going to do hardcore overclocking, they'll just use the BIOS features, therefore you don't require the device. But to be on the safe side, we'll include the connector for the device should you happen to have one. Seems like woolly thinking to me, but let's park that and move on to the cons, the negative points, of which I have two. First is, the board is monumentally expensive, and secondly, the tuning controller is supported but not included. Should you buy the MEG X870E Godlike X? I have a simple test for you. When I reviewed this MEG X870E carbon Wi-Fi motherboard, it cost £430. I liked it a great deal. It's now priced at £450. And many of our audience said that's a stupid amount of money to pay for a motherboard, £430 or £450. And for those members of the Kit Guru audience, I say the Godlike X is not for you. It's a 3 out of 10. It's a run screaming for the doors. However, if you think spending £5,000, £6,000, £7,000 on a PC, £2,500 on a graphics card, £1,000 on memory, nearly £1,000 on a CPU, if this is all the kind of thing you consider, in that context, the Godlike X is pretty bloomin' good. It's an 8.5 out of 10. It's a worth buying. Do please check us out on TikTok and with kitguru.net on the web.